This is part 3 of Introduction to Photoshop, designing a magazine cover. And we're going to pick up right where we left off with digitizing our female model into a cyborg. So let's go ahead and continue. Let's clean up these lines now. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the lines folder. I'm going to open up the heads folder. I'm going to click on the mask layer right here. I'm going to hold down Control and Alt on the keyboard and drag it to the lines folder. And you can see here it automatically clipped out those lines. And what I did is I made a copy of this mask layer and applied it to the folder itself. In fact, I'm going to hold down Control and Alt and drag this to the head layer as well. And that way, these are the masks that I'm going to use to adjust the face, to get these lines to really work with this face. Okay, so if I zoom in here, I'm going to click on the lines mask layer. I'm going to go to my brush, and I'm going to go to the brush settings, make sure it's set to hard, no spacing. And then I'm on black. And I'm going to paint out this off the nose, just like that. So that works. Now let's go ahead and adjust these lines to make them look like they're actually separating out the skin pieces instead of being actual lines, that they're these pieces are forming the lines, if that makes any sense. So what we're going to do is you're going to double click on the layer, not on the name, but on the layer. It's actually the folder. And you'll get the layer styles property. And I think you can also, with the folder selected, come to here and go into layer styles. I haven't done it this way. Maybe not. I wonder if you can right click. Right click, layer. Not seeing it. I might be missing it. So I don't see it there either. Anyway, you can just double click and you'll go into layer styles. And again, make sure you're not double clicking on the name. Now, if you're not seeing some of the settings that I'm seeing here, it's because you're running older versions of Photoshop. Now, we're not going to be using any of these settings like plus signs. I think that's completely new to CC 2015. It may have been 14, but I'm pretty sure it was 15. But like I said, I'm not going to be using any of those extra plus signs. But you should still see the Bevel Emboss, Stroke, Inner Shadow, Drop Shadows, Outer Glow, those type of things. So what we're going to use is Bevel Emboss. Now, when you play with this, make sure that you click on the layer and not just click on the checkbox. All right, so when you click on it, you get the properties. If you don't click on it, what's going to happen is you're just going to turn it on and off. And you can see here, it's already starting to affect my scene. So let me go ahead and hit cancel so I can zoom in. But before I zoom in, I'm actually going to zoom out and look at lighting. So the way lighting is in this shot, it's actually coming from an angle over here, but not too far because the whole face is lit. I just know that it's slightly up and in the front of her face, because you can see here the shadowing. Now it's not straight because we wouldn't see a shadow underneath the chin, and we're getting a little bit of shadowing into the jaw, so I figure it's a little bit further back, blasting the face. So let's go ahead and double click again. In fact, before I do, let me zoom in, because once you're in layer styles, there's not much you can actually do outside of layer styles. So I'm viewing this at 100% now, and I'm going to double click the layer. And I'm going to check Bevel Emboss. And you can see here that it created this look. Now, yours is probably on inner bevel or outer bevel, and this is what you're getting. So this looks terrible. So what you want to do is click here and choose Pillow Emboss. You can actually click through any of them to see what kind of looks you get. But I think this one gives me the best result for what I'm looking for. So I'm still getting a nice edge right here, lighting edge, that would happen when light hits the edge. And I'm getting the inside bar area that's slightly dark, that's been shadowed. And of course, you'd still see it because light would be bouncing around in there to show you that edge. So that's really nice. Now, lighting angle, this is very important. Mine is already at the correct position, but sometimes it would be over here. And this would be the incorrect lighting angle. In fact, you can see here it throws off my entire layout. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this and pull it towards the direction that the lighting is happening. And like I said, it's a little bit up, and think of the dot as the actual face, and it's kind of close to the face. It's not way off and to the left. It's something like that. If I pull it way out here, you can see it dramatically changes the lighting, and that's definitely not it. Let's pull it back some, and that's better. Okay, so I think I like that. Now you can also choose right here, technique. I like smooth, but you can also do chiseled hard, and that's going to give you more of a mechanical look, which is probably what I should be doing. That's kind of nice. And then you have chiseled soft, which is going to give you like a bad tool result. I'm going to go with smooth. I might actually eventually switch over to chisel hard. We'll see. All right, so everything else in here is fine. You can play with the depth, like you can bring it up and you'll see that it increases the depth. You can bring it down if you want it very shallow. So it's up to you. I think 113 is a good area. Now size, I've got it set to 7. If you bring this too far up, it's going to look really wonky. And if you bring it too far down, it's going to be too sharp. So I think 7 was a pretty good number to use. And then soften edge if you want to. I don't need to. Everything else I think I'm good with. So I'm just going to click OK. I can always go back into here by double clicking right here on Bevel Emboss and adjust the settings. I can even hide and unhide the effect to see the result. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let's go ahead and save this real quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the mask layer to help us clean up some of these edges. So I'm going to go to my paintbrush and paint this down a little bit to get it to a sharp edge that falls into the eye. And that was probably too much, maybe not. In fact, actually, let me come over to turn off shape dynamics. It's going to help me. I have that for the Wacom tablet. And same thing in here. Let me thin this out. Probably should be using a mouse, but unfortunately my mouse died. Okay, so that's how you clean up getting the shapes to work. Now, the hair area, let's start with that. Let's actually fix the fact that the hair is not on top of the line right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this. We're going to duplicate the face layer right here. So I'm going to drag and drop it to the piece of paper or Command J. And I'm going to move this all the way to the top. Come on. There we go. All right, so this is going to be my hair. Top layer. Okay, so with my hair layer activated, what I'm going to do is click on this mask and delete it. And I'm actually going to draw out. Let me go to the lasso tool here. And I can even lower the opacity so I can see where I need to draw out. So it's basically this area here. Maybe a little bit of this hair here that I need to mask on top of it. So let me set this back to 100%. And with this selection area, this is a kind of just a drag select or draw select option. And if you don't see this tool, just click and hold it down. You got lots of options in here. Or 3 options. I guess that's not a lot. But anyway, so the hair selected, I'm going to go ahead and click on New Layer. Creates a mask layer. And I can play with the opacity of the whole layer, or I can just start painting in white. So with this layer selected, I'm going to switch it over to actually black. I want to paint it out. I'm going to switch actually over to a soft brush, paintbrush, soft, no spacing. And I'm going to increase its size and kind of paint this back in. Then I'm going to X on the keyboard to paint it back out. So I'm going to increase this. I need it to fade away as the hair goes back. So something like that. And that was probably too much. Go to my history. Oops. Let me try this again and then a bigger brush. Not big enough. Okay, that should be good. All right, so it's fading away in the hair, which is good, but I need to probably put some of the hairs solid on top of the head. So let me bring this brush scale down. I'm going to reactivate my shape dynamics. Now, you won't get shape dynamics if you're not using a Wacom tablet. And I make sure I set it to pin pressure. And then let me bring it all the way down so I can just paint in some of this hair over the line. So just following the hair, I can really zoom in and get very specific with it. But I think that's probably a little too much. You can vary the thickness of the brush too. Let's zoom in here actually. Okay, you can see here I've taken out too much in areas I shouldn't have. So let me switch X on the keyboard. Again, we'll switch your black and white, so you don't have to keep going over to the side. You're just going to keep playing back and forth until you really get this to fade into the hair. Just like that. And then it will look like, if I zoom out 100%, that the hair is starting to cover it. A couple areas I need to clean up. Let me just tap this down. I can even change whether it's gray or white to get a different look to help soften it. And you can see here now it looks like it's fading back in the hair. The hair is sitting on top of the line, which is good. Okay, so we fixed that. Let's go ahead and go save again. The reason why I'm saving often is because I have to actually pause these tutorials to get them to refresh. Otherwise the audio and the video start to go off. Now that we've got that done, let's start playing with the line edges. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the lines folder here, the paintbrush, or I should say the mask layer. And let's zoom in here and go to the paintbrush tool. I want to make sure I set this to shape dynamics as well. That's fine. Well, maybe not. Let me turn that off. And I am on a soft brush. This time I definitely want a soft brush. Whoops. That's history. Yep, soft brush. Okay. So let me pull this back up. I'm painting in white. I want to go X for black. Make sure I'm set to black here. And I'm going to paint this a little bit more in than the actual bridge of the nose. And I got to repaint out. Let me zoom out here. Okay. So there's a couple things I need to do to really get this to look like it's on the bridge of the nose. Number one, I need to paint in some of the nose. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. And this new layer I'm going to paint on top by selecting some of the highlights in here. So I'm going to go to the paintbrush tool, and I'm going to actually hold down Alt and make sure that this layer is on top of the lines layer. Grab this and paint it. Let's grab it here. Make sure that that's solid. I'm just painting in this kind of highlighted area. I can grab the highlight area and pull it back through. And this is where I can use the eraser tool. So this is the eraser tool, allows me to erase. Let me make sure it's set to a hard brush, no spacing. I'm going to click and I'm going to hold down Shift and click. That allows me to draw straight lines to clean up that edge. And I can even switch over to a softer brush. Keep hitting my history. And I can soften out the paint so it doesn't look so harsh. And then go back to my paintbrush. Make sure it's set to the right settings, hard. Decrease this and just tap in a little bit more highlight right here. Switch back to my eraser. Bring this down. So I've created an edge. That's exactly what I was after. It's a nice soft edge, or a hard edge, a highlight edge. And I can actually, let me go ahead and go to my paintbrush tool, grab this darker color in here and paint this too big. Let me decrease the brush size. Okay, so that's going to wrap around. Like that. Now, let me go all the way down, just like that. I don't want to cover the highlight. And that's probably a little bit too much, so let's bring in the eraser brush, decrease its size, kind of thin this out. And I'm going to bring the black all the way to there. So let's go ahead and go to the paintbrush again. If you hold down Alt on the keyboard, you can select the black color. Paint this back in. just like that. So we're kind of painting now, not kind of painting, we are painting in, oops, let's go to 100%, the curved elements to make it look like it's actually being cut into the flesh. So let's come up to here and do the same thing. So with this, let's click here. We need to kind of eliminate some of this. So I'm going to go ahead and with my paintbrush, increase the brush size, paint out some of this black to go in. That's probably far enough. And zoom in. Go to this layer here. This is our paint layer. Grab some of this highlight here and decrease my brush size. Make sure I'm taking this highlight all the way to the edge. Maybe grab even a lighter highlight. Just like that. And then the darker area up here, I'm going to grab this and paint this in. Now, the back area where the skin tone is at, I'm going to click on the head layer. I'm going to go to my black and erase this area. Just like that. Okay, now I can go back to this paint layer and paint in this curving in. That's good. And I'm actually going to erase more of the line. So with my black mask, oops, Control Z, too much. Take this out right here. Something like that. And I'm actually going to go back to this layer and paint in black to cover this highlight that's being created here that shouldn't be there. Then I can go back, select this color again, and finish painting it in. All right, so you can see here now it's created that lip that I'm after for the edge. So that's pretty cool. And I would repeat that process down in the chin and the neck area. So let's zoom in. Again, click on the mask layer. Let me save this and stop it real quick to make sure the video is not catching off. Save. Okay, so let's start chipping away at this one. So I'm going to go to the mask layer and eat away at it. And let's go ahead and grab this and go ahead and eat away at this as well. I am seeing a soft edge here. In fact, I'm going to grab this mask and I'm going to delete it. I'm just going to click delete. And that way when I paint on this one, I can harden that out. So if I, with my white, increase the brush size. Why is white painting it away? Control Z. Make sure it's selected. It's eating it away. Why is it eating it away? Still is. Interesting. Oh, it's not 100% white. That's why. There we go. Now it is. And let's turn that back on. Now we can clean up, create more of a hard edge here. All right, just saying if you need to, because I noticed it was kind of soft. Okay, so let's jump back to this layer and let's paint this in. So here we got the paintbrush. Let's decrease the size. Let's start grabbing colors. Alt this color to start with to paint it down in here. Then this bluish color. Paint that in. That's looking good. And I'm going to go ahead and grab this highlight here. Make sure I'm covering up the black there. This highlight's going to loop a little bit, but then it's also going to start switching to this darker area. Like that. That's too much. Let's try that. A little more highlight. Maybe even tap in a little bit of the blue. And there we go. Okay, so basically just repeating this process over and over again. Paint the highlight in, Oops, Control Z. Make sure I'm grabbing this nice bright area. And I think I want to erase more of the line. Switch, X. Yeah, that's good. Go back to this layer, grab these colors. You can see here, all looking like it's working together. Last but not least, let's go ahead and erase this area. Increase the brush size. Come back to this layer and just start painting it in. Nothing new, everything the same. Smaller brush though. And I didn't grab a highlight. There we have it. And I can even maybe, that's probably fine. Okay, so now I have my edges all set, cuts in my skin, which are good. That's a good start. Probably clean this up a little bit. I'm thinking that the blur factor on the eyebrow right here needs to be cleaned up. So that was this layer. Make sure I'm set to black, grab my paintbrush, probably bring up the brush a little bit. So that way it matches into this, so it's not so atrocious. Let me go ahead and go to a soft brush. Okay, that works a lot better. All right, so we've got our lines put in. Let's go ahead and save this. There's one more thing I want to paint out, and that's the line through the circle and the forehead. So let me zoom in here. Instead of painting it out though on this layer, I'm going to go ahead and go to the line forehead, create a mask layer, and paint it out on this mask. Okay, so let me minimize my folders. Actually, I definitely want to make sure I'm on the lines folder because I want to create some more lines. Let me zoom out here. Thinking about creating some lines along the neck now. So maybe one across here, one across here. So let's go ahead and grab the pen tool again, make sure all our settings are set. And I'm actually going to create a new folder just to be on the safe side. And click, click, and click. Now I can adjust these. Let me just adjust this one and then I'll duplicate it. So I'm thinking pull this down a little bit. Move this way. Oops. And I'm thinking actually this line I'm going to have thicker. So I'm going to say 5 on this one. And I'm going to move it up a little bit. So I'm going to use my arrow tools. I'm going to go to my move tool, sorry. Move tool and then my arrows on the keyboard just to pull it up. That's probably good. Then I'm going to duplicate it. So make a copy. And I'm going to drag this down. I think that looks good right there. Okay, so there's my 2 lines creating the neck area. And to be honest, there's a lot of this down here I don't want. So in fact, actually, let me raise this line now that I'm seeing it zoomed out. Go back to my move tool, make sure it's selected. Let me move it up a little bit. Let me grab this line, move it up, something like that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hide this whole body area. I'm not going to deal with that. I just want the head and neck. So I'm going to go with the big paintbrush. Blow it way up. Make sure I'm set to a hard brush, no spacing, and just start erasing. Okay, so I think that's a good start point. So File, Save. I also just realized that because of my hair layer here, I've got some white coming back in, so let's erase some of this hair layer. With it selected, black, and just take this out. There we go, much better. Okay, so now we can start adjusting maybe color for this whole thing. In fact, let's save it one more time. Actually, before I adjust color, let me talk about what you could do about putting things inside these holes that we've created. I still need to adjust on the neck the areas to paint out right here and right here on all 4 parts. But I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'll do that on my own time since it's pretty much the same that we've done on all these other edges. But in this case, I actually want to create something that is visible within the neck. So to show you how to do this, let me jump over to the internet real quick and let that load. And I'm going to find, let's say, wires. I'll look up images. And I'm going to make sure it's set to search tools, size large. And it looks like a lot of these are stock photos that you have to buy. Maybe this one's not. Okay, let's try something like this. This is a mess, but it's a good start point to really see how this works. So I'm going to right click and say copy image. And I'm going to jump over to the file in here. Now I'm going to paste this below the paint layers. So I'm going to hit Control V on the keyboard or edit paste. All right. And I want to make sure this is below my paint layer. In fact, let me call this paint layer. Okay. Now there's a nifty tool in Photoshop that well, there's lots of nifty tools in Photoshop, but this one will allow me to use a layer as a mask. Okay, so with this layer, I'm going to call it wires. All right. I'm going to hold down Alt on the keyboard, and you can see I get this little arrow when I'm in between these 2 layers. All right. Now when I click, what it does is it forces the bottom layer to mask out the top layer. All right. So it's using this whole folder now as a masking layer. So now I can hit Control T, and I can scale this bad boy down because I just want it, let's say, in the neck area. I can spend time rotating it, give it some direction, scale it up a bit, and voila, now I've got wires inside the neck. Okay, now obviously I would want to spend time painting this in. There's several ways you can do this. You can mask it to make it fade into black, or you can, let's just try that. Let's go into mask layer, paintbrush, and make sure it's set to black. Decrease the size, and we want soft brush, by the way. So I'm going to go to history and undo that. Soft brush with no spacing. So then I can just fade it all back. And that was too much, and my computer's really lagging doing this, by the way. That kind of brought some of it back. But anyway, so this is that one way of painting it. And that's one way of actually getting wires in the neck. You can actually type in anything, car parts. I don't know, do all sorts of things, motor parts that you can put inside. You can try to look up robot parts and put it inside the neck. Anything you want. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. And just because my computer is really lagging right now with this file, I think I'm going to pretty much end there with this. So I think I figured out what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and delete the wires layer. I really don't like it. And I'm going to jump back over to the internet. Now I typed in air shock, and it gave me various different types of images of shocks, which are kind of cool. I think I like this one right here, so let's open this up. I'm going to right click and say copy image. Jump back over to Photoshop. I'm going to go File, New, which is Control N on the keyboard, and click OK, and click Control V or Edit Paste. Now I'm going to use the Quick Select tool here, and make sure if you don't see it, just click and hold it down and find it. And I'm going to drag select over my piece. Get rid of anything I don't want by holding down Alt on the keyboard. Okay, so that looks about right. I'm going to go to select a little bit more down here. Okay. Now I'm going to go select, refine edge, just like we've done before. Smart radius, I'm going to dial this up a little bit. I'm going to increase the smooth a little bit, smoothing it out. And maybe contrast, disseminate colors, click OK. Then I'll use the brush tool. And go over to brush, hard brush, no space, just to clean it up. Make sure I'm on black. Click here, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and click here to draw a straight line. And of course I can spend more time cleaning it up, but we're running out of time with this tutorial. So now that I have this, I'm going to click on it. And again, I've got it selected in here in the layers, and I'm going to drag it over to this file. Let it load in. And we're going to go ahead and start positioning this guy into my shot. So I'm going to use this in the neck area. Control T on the keyboard to position it. I'm thinking maybe something like that, because there'd be this muscle strand that comes down. So this is going to represent that muscle strand. I'm going to hit Enter on the keyboard to lock it in place. I'm going to hold down Alt, so that way I can basically use this as a masking layer like we did a little bit earlier with the wires. And boom, that's now in the neck area. Now what I also want to do is make it kind of fade back in there, so I'm going to lower the opacity. It's going to bring it down, and I'm also going to create a new layer above it, and I'm going to hold down Alt, lock this in, and this one's going to be called Shadow. And I can call this one Part 1. So in the shadow layer, I'm going to go with the brush. This time I'm going to switch over to a soft brush, no spacing, and make sure I'm on black. I'm going to increase the size. And I'm going to paint in a shadow, and that's a little too much. Just trying to get the edge. Yeah, there we go. That's getting it to fade back in there a little bit more. Make it look like there's a shadow being casted from the upper layer onto it. So that's looking good. I can even decrease it some and kind of come in here and clean up a little bit more. And since the lighting is coming from this direction, I could even tap in some shadow on the back end so it fades it out. Let me double click this. So that's 100%. Let me increase this layer to, yeah, that's better, about 88. All right. So that's how I can go through and add parts inside the neck area and make them look like they're fit. And the shadow layer really helps. So let's jump back over to the internet. I have lots of parts options in here that I could use. I even pulled up a camshaft. Let's maybe play with this image. Right click, copy image, jump back over to, actually I don't know how this is going to fit in the neck area. So let me jump back over here. This one will work. Right click, copy image. And I'm going to jump back over to Photoshop. I don't need this one anymore. I'm going to hit Control N on the keyboard for new. Okay, Control V for paste. And this time I'm going to use the magic wand tool and select the white area. Looks like I did a pretty good job selecting out the white. Maybe this corner here, inside there. That's about it. So I'm going to go select inverse. I'm going to go select refine edge, just so I can make sure I'm cleaning it up a bit. Smooth, contrast, disseminate, click OK. All right, so we got this pipe now. Let's drag this over to our file. And whoops, let's pull this out. It automatically fell in between these layers, so that's why we didn't see it. So I'm going to hit Control T, position this, and I'm thinking maybe the back neck muscle here is what it's representing. Yeah, I think that's going to work. Let me hit Enter, and I'm going to put this below the shadow layer. And I can bring it back a little bit. and then come in with the shadow layer, paintbrush, and really paint it back in. Don't want to do it too hard. Definitely want it to fall. Now you can always use the eraser tool and set no spacing, size. Let me increase the size a little bit more to help bring some of this back. That's probably too much. Just kind of tap it in. Oops. Okay, so now I'm starting to add parts underneath the skin area to give it more of that robotic look. I can even take this piece here, let's say in this one bar, and I'm going to duplicate it, Control J. I am going to make sure, let me pull it back out. I'm going to have to re-sublink these. There we go. So with this bar selected, I'm going to hit Control T on the keyboard. I'm thinking about putting it up here in the cheek area. I'm really just after the middle bar as if it was like a clip in the cheek. Okay, let me hit enter. And I zoom in. You can see here it's created this almost like a clip underneath the skin. Now what I could do now is, again, shadow layer. It's very important that we mess with the shadow layer and tap in the shadow. See how that makes it fall back. Without it, with it. Helps pull the element back into the actual face. So I can keep going through and doing things like that, even duplicating it, or I can find other parts that might be interesting to have underneath the skin. I mean, there's lots of options. I'm going to let you guys go on your own. I was just seeing if there's anything else that I might want to throw in right now. No. So that's one way of adding elements underneath. And again, we're using the lines layer as a mask to kind of hold the shapes of, or not hold the shapes, but mask them out so they fit underneath everything. And of course, it's non-destructive, so I can go ahead and keep duplicating and changing and modifying. Now, you can also come in here and paint. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. For right now, I'll leave it above. And I'm going to take the paintbrush, maybe throw down some bluish gray tone. Click OK. And let me set, do I want a soft brush for this? I think the first layer I do. The furthest back. So, and yeah, this is going to be below the main paint layer. So I'm going to paint this into the nose area, maybe something like that. And let's go ahead, switch this up a little bit, bring it up. I'm going to do this time a hard brush. Now I'm going to click and hold down Shift and click to draw straight lines. I don't really want squiggly lines underneath this. All right, and then maybe another lighter area right about there. Now I could play with the, again, soft brushes and all that, depending on what look I'm going for. Now let me go ahead and drag and drop this below the shadow layer. And you can see here that's implemented into the nose area, which doesn't look too bad. Again, I can play with the opacity, lower it to bring it back a little bit. And of course, with the shadow layer, let's tap in some black. And this time I want to make sure I'm on a soft brush, no space. Just to get some shadow going. Probably tap a little bit more in here. And let me go ahead and go back to the eraser. I think it's a little too much. Oops. Let's go from here to here. I erased too much. There, that's better. Okay, so now it looks like the parts are working well with each other. I think this paint layer, let me adjust the black, switch back to a hard brush. And I'm going to paint this black. Whoops, went too far. Let me zoom in here. Just want to get rid of this little round corner. Okay. That's definitely better. So that's another way you can actually add components underneath the skin. You don't actually have to use an image. You can just use paint and paint in elements. I think maybe having this right here glow could be kind of cool. So I'm going to create a new layer. Might as well just create it above for right now. And I can choose any color I want, green, blue. I think maybe a very light blue. And the paintbrush option I'm going to use is a soft brush, no spacing. Increase the size. Just going to paint around. Probably have to erase or scale this down some. All right, so let me go ahead and drag this below the shadow layer. And definitely need to scale it. So with it selected, Control T on the keyboard or Edit, Free Transform. And we're going to scale this guy down. I'm going to stick with this. I'm actually going to use the eraser tool. Make sure it's set to a soft brush. And I'm going to tab out this right here. It's a little too far, actually. Because you want it to fall off like it's illuminating something else. Oh, too much. And back to my paintbrush. It's a back and forth thing to get it right. Too much. Unfortunately, my computer's becoming very laggy, so I can't really see what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Now it looks like I've got some kind of weird element right here. And let me hide and unhide layers to see what that is. Definitely not part of that. Okay, so it's part of this layer. I'm going to just paint it out. There we go. Okay, so now that I have the glow there, let me jump over to the paint layer. Or sorry, the glow layer, which was what, this one? Yep. And this was the nose in paint. So let me go to the glow layer. I'm going to duplicate it. So Control J on the keyboard. I'm going to move it up to about there and reset this back in. So this is my copy, and I'm going to go ahead and set this one, the overlay option for this to, or sorry, not overlay, blending mode. This is blending mode right here. You can choose lots of options. You have lighten, screen, overlay, and I think overlay is the one I'm going to use. So with this layer selected, I'm going to create a new mask. And with the mask, make sure I'm on black and start painting out. I'm just after to create a glow along the edges. Something like that. I can probably tap out some of this up here. Let me go back in with the paintbrush on the actual layer and paint. I'm going to paint around just like that. And then we can go back in with the mask and kind of control it. So that's how I'm controlling the spread of the glow. And voila, there we have it. We have now a glowing component in our robot. Okay, so I could continue keep doing things like this to the model. Keep adding parts underneath the face. Let's say I'm going to create a new layer about here. Call this forehead paint, so F paint. And come in with my brush. Let's see, a dark metal tone. Paint that right here. Come in a little bit lighter. Paint that a little bit lighter. Just stacking paint layers. And then one really, really bright. Something like that. And then, like I've done anything else, shadow layer, set it to black, increase its size. Let me zoom in here. Just kind of tap out. Or not tap out, but tap it back. Maybe even just drop the opacity a little bit. Oops, not on the shadow layer, on the F paint. There we go. Okay. So that's what you'd continue to do. I think I'm going to call it good just because of how much my computer's lagging to do all this. And I think that's pretty much it. No, okay, color adjustment. I forgot about that. So let me save this real quick. File, save. There are many ways in Photoshop to color adjust. So I'm going to show you a non-destructive way. So I'm going to jump to my layers. I'm actually going to click on the very top layer and click this icon right here. This is like an adjustment layer. So it's going to affect all the layers below it. So let's say I use levels. And here's the properties for levels. It opens up the properties window. So if I pull up the blacks, you can see here it's adjusting the blacks, and if I pull up the white area, it's bringing up the whites. So this is how I can color adjust, but it's a layer up here, so it's affecting anything that's below it. And this is very useful. It allows me to color adjust the entire palette without actually committing to this. If I don't like it, I can always delete the layer. So let's say something like that, and just to show you, I can hide or unhide the layer, and you can see how it really makes the element pop. Just adding a little bit of levels, or I can, like I said, trash it. I'm gonna undo that. And the other thing it does, it gives me a mask that I can paint. So if I say, you know what, I think it's affecting the face too much, let me go to black, make sure I'm on a soft brush, and let me just increase the size. And I can paint it out of the face. You can see here when I paint over the hair, it really affects the hair. So I'm gonna undo that. I'm actually going to undo all the painting together because I like the way the levels affected everything. So let's go ahead and create another adjustment layer. And you can use all sorts of options in here. Hue and saturation, so I can saturate the image more. I can desaturate it, which is kind of what I'm going for, is more of a desaturated look. There we go. I can even say colorize, and I can color it. I'm not going to do colorize. Okay, so desaturation to pull the color out a little bit more. And then I'm also going to create another one, another adjustment layer, and this one's going to be curves. Where's my curves? There we go. Okay, so curves allows me to affect the RGB level as well as red, green, and blue individually. So just to show you how this works, I'm going to click in here to create a dot, and if I pull it up and pull it down, you can see how it's affecting it. And I can create various different S curves or whatnot to create various different effects. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and there's my reset button. There we go. So I'm going to switch over to the red. Actually, yes, the red. And I'm going to pull the red up a little bit, actually down. And I'm going to grab the green and pull it down a little bit. And I'm going to grab the blue and pull it up a little bit. And again, I can play with where the blue is affecting. So I can have it I think something like that. Now again, I can unhide and hide the effect. So I think that gives a cooler look to the image. Flattening out the skin, giving more of a mechanical look. Now, of course, you don't have to do this. This is all up to you. Now, if I don't want it to affect the hair, just like we were doing before, click on here, click the paintbrush, and paint out the hair. So you can really refine how you're painting it in and out. And I think I actually liked it affecting the hair. I don't like the reddish orange hair that's coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my history and stick with that. All right. So once I'm happy with everything, oops, I just switched the layers. But anyway, once I'm happy with this layout, let me go back to levels real quick. And if I want to readjust, I just go to the properties, or I can double click on it and it will open the properties. Let me pull this up a little bit more. Then I can go to my history. Make sure I'm on the bottom. Just really take a look at what I did. Okay. So, like I said, once I'm happy with what I have, I can collapse it down since it's its own file. In fact, let me save it again. I can keep this file and go back and readjust it instead of keeping all these folders or all these layers when I put it into my Photoshop document. Let me close this. Or my magazine cover. I could keep them all as layers. In fact, I can create a master folder that all these sit in, and I can drag and drop that to my magazine cover. However, the issue would be that with my system is it would really slow it down. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse everything down. Now there's a way to do this. You can come up to this right here and say merge down or merge visible or flatten image. So I'm just going to click merge visible, and it's going to flatten out everything in my scene that had a visible icon. Now I can go over to, let me actually open up the magazine, jump back to here, use my move tool, and I'm going to drag and drop it into this document, just like that. And voila. I'm going to come back to here, and I'm actually going to undo this. History. Okay. And just make sure I save. So I still have the original file if I want to go back and tweak it and do more things to it. And once it's done saving. Okay. So now in here, let me go ahead and close this. Real quick, I'm going to right click. Excuse me, my voice is starting to go. Let's see, convert to smart object. That way I can scale it around and possibly scale it up, because I kind of like the size of that shot right there, but I think it's going to eat up too much space in my magazine cover. So I'm going to bring it down. And possibly something like this. I don't know yet. Let's try that for now. And because I do have it as a kind of a vector, quasi-vector layer, I can scale it back up and I'm not going to lose any detail. It's not going to pixelate on me. So I'm going to go ahead and end the tutorial here, and we're going to go on to part 4, I believe. And we'll finish laying out our magazine cover and bring in probably the actual logo and everything else. So join me for part 4.